Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Going to be checking your comments as we go through the show. So if you're watching live and you've got something to say, do get involved in our conversation. Our podcast is entirely supported by our loyal Patreon community, and without them, we couldn't make the show each week. Now, we have 6 new patrons who joined us in the last week, which is great news, and we're so pleased to have you there. So a huge welcome to Chris Beaver, Jodie Neville, Robert Atkins, Paul Stevens, and John Margits, who've joined our Bobby Stokes tier, and Saints in Exile, who's joined our Francis Benali tier and will get a personal shout out at the end of every episode. We really appreciate your support, and I'll have a bit more on that and how you can join in just a minute. Coming up this week on the podcast, our first win on the opening day of a season in 10 years. Plus, there are 2 games this week. Gillingham in the Cup on Tuesday night before Norwich visit St Mary's on Saturday. Connor Southwell from the Pink-Un Norwich City Podcast is going to join us to preview the game a bit later on. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined this week by our regular contributors, Steve Grant, who's the owner of SaintsWeb, Glen is the writer of the blog League 1-10, and Alfie House is the Saints reporter at the Southern Daily Echo. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 238 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, before we kick things off, just one final shout out for our Patreon community. Their monthly contributions fully support the show, and we couldn't make TSP without their support. There are 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast each month, each of those tiers has different perks like access to an ad-free version of the pod, exclusive TSP t-shirts and merch bundles. There's the TSP FPL and access to some of our TSP events and much more. So if you've just joined, we'll be checking in on the FPL later in the season to make sure that you've all signed up. And if you want to get involved in supporting TSP each month, you can head over to patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast for more details. All the links are in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description. So, on to the football. Southampton made the perfect start to life in the Championship thanks to Che Adams' late winner at Sheffield Wednesday. And I've got to be honest, this is the first time in about 5 months I've been looking forward to discussing a game. I've spent all day looking forward to the podcast. Lots of smiley faces, lots of positivity. Glen, our first competitive win since March, and it felt good. It was a pleasure to watch at times.
It was, very much so. After the opening sort of 5 minutes, we got caught on the transition, didn't we? And there was a bit of a scramble in our penalty area. That was a bit of a wake up call. But after that, we scored very early, obviously, with Nathan Teller's goal. I don't care what anyone says. I know officially it's not, but
was that a travesty that he was robbed?
Absolutely. We'll probably get onto that later. But yeah. So it was great to go 1-0 up, and it looked for about 5 or 6 minutes that we were going to absolutely steamroller them. But we got to half time, it was still 1-0 because basically Sheffield Wednesday dropped it's like 4, 5, 50 yards, wasn't it? They didn't show any ambition at all to get out of defence and just tried to stay in the game, which fair play to them, they did. So there was always that nagging doubt at half time that it would only take a set piece to get back into it, and sure enough, that's what happened. And that's something that we are obviously going to have to work on. We've got a new set piece coach coming in. Though what can you do when there's a geezer who's 6'8" or whatever that centre back is, because he's gigantic, headed it back. But there you go, 1-1, and you did wonder if we'd obviously been trying to pass Sheffield Wednesday to death, and it had been going really, really well in that regard. And you just wondered, having had the setback, will we keep it going? And we did. Substitutions were made at the right time. Stuart Armstrong, huge difference when he came on. Che Adams came on, obviously, to freshen things up, and we got the goal. And the goal seemed to be, to me anyway, a direct result of the fact that Sheffield Wednesday had been chasing us around all game, and they just couldn't keep it going. They just got tired. And Ward-Prowse made that run, and absolutely no one went with him, and that was where the goal came from. Again, it's a lovely way to pass from Walker Peters, and Che was there to sweep it in, so it was great. And then we had 9 minutes of keep ball, which was fantastic. just approximately 100 passes in 9 minutes, and even Bobby Madley, he's a dog lover, even Bobby Madley couldn't find any extra time to comply with the directives. So lots to talk about Bobby and the refereeing at some point, because he was different. Be interesting to know whether that's just what we're going to have to get used to in the Championship with referees, or whether it was just Bobby Madley being himself. Because we used to have him in the Premier League about 4 or 5 years ago, and he was absolutely shocking then. So I don't know whether it's him or whether that's the sort of general standard we're going to have.
The new directives, yeah.
But so many good performances from so many players. It's like the perfect day, really. I mean, first off, we won. Secondly, we played really well. The style of play, and 3, there were things to work on. So it's not anything you can get complacent about. We have the transitions to work on. We have the set piece defending to work on, and we have the sort of when to release the ball into the strikers. There was a bit. Occasionally, you'd see Armstrong make a run, and he wouldn't get the ball when he should have done. And sometimes you'd see the ball come in from the wings, and there was no one making a run. And it's just that sort of telepathy, if you like, that only comes with work on the training ground. So there needs to be a bit of improvement there. So overall, perfect start to the season.
Steve, it's been a while, but plenty of positives to discuss tonight. What impressed you the most about Friday?
Just the composure, I think. The fact that we didn't get completely flapped by Sheffield Wednesday equalising. I mean, Saints teams of the past, even Saints teams of the very recent past, would have folded like a deck of cards as soon as that equaliser went in. But actually, apart from, I don't think they had another shot, did they? It was, Bazunu's. They've had one shot on target. Bazunu's got no chance with it. And Bazunu's touches have mostly just been passing the ball out to either centre backs or chipping it over the striker to a fullback to get us sort of moving up the pitch again. And so, excuse me, he won't have had a quieter game for us, I wouldn't have thought. So yeah, a lot of positives. I think the only slight thing I thought was our tempo and kind of the kind of clinical method of the way that we were passing eased off after about half an hour for about half an hour. So kind of either side of half time, where it did kind of feel as if we were a little bit passing for passing's sake. You had a lot of times where we kind of manufactured the ball into a decent area, kind of about 20 yards in from the touchline, and either Teller or Edozie would be in a lot of room out on the wing. And rather than put the ball out there for them to then run at the fullback, and they both had their respective fullbacks on the run completely. Edozie was brilliant, I thought, running at Callum Patterson. And yeah, we didn't really, given that was such a, we worked out fairly early on that was quite a good avenue for us to attack. We didn't quite use it as much as I think I'd hoped. I kind of fully accept I'm kind of splitting hairs a little bit here, but
that's what we're used to as well.
but we will, at the end of the day, we will play against much better teams than Sheffield Wednesday. I think that's the brutal truth, and we've still only scraped that game 2-1. When given the dominance, there was a danger that if that game ends 1-1, everyone's saying, "Oh well, this is typical Russell Martin team, all fart, no shit." And we'd have basically ended up with a point, having basically been camped in their half, but kind of replicating that scene from The Simpsons where Portugal and Mexico pass the ball between each other without going anywhere. So I think in many ways we kind of got away with it, if you're kind of being overly harsh, but at the same time, we've kept going, and as Glenn said, they were tired from kind of half-heartedly chasing us about. They sat so deep that they weren't really interested in pressing us anywhere, sort of within probably 40 yards Like anything between their goal and 40 yards, they'd come towards us. Anywhere near our goal, they just weren't interested in the slightest. It seems as if they were almost playing for a draw. Other than that first 5 minutes, they were playing for a draw more or less from the start. So to break them down in that manner, that late in the game it's great confidence boost. That as far as Opta are concerned, both of our centre forwards have scored already this season, and I think just the performances of individuals were really heartening. I thought Smallbone was excellent. There weren't many passes from him in particular that you would kind of say were pointless. There was a little bit of toing and throwing in sort of late in the game where we were just trying to keep possession to run the clock down. But earlier in the game, almost all of his passes had a purpose. It was creating a different angle for somebody. It was passing through the lines to Alcaraz, who, this seems to kind of be his thing. That for 45, 50 minutes he's brilliant, and then he kind of disappears a little bit into the ether. Just a stamina thing, I think that the club can work on. And the one thing that was very noticeable when Stu Armstrong came on, all of a sudden we had players that were happy to dribble with the ball as well. So Stu was dribbling through the channel, and then also had a Dozy outside him who also wanted to run with it, and that just gave Wednesday an extra problem to have. And all of a sudden, you're then, not only are we just passing in front of them and around them, we're also using a bit of pace, because it was something we identified previously, that they're quite a slow team. Apart from that guy they brought on as sub midway through second half up front, they didn't really run at us. And I think that was quite key for us, being able to keep them at arm's length. Really, they didn't pose any other than from that one set piece and the early little bit of a scramble. There were no alarms, and it
felt like we dealt with him as well.
Yeah, it was kind of worryingly comfortable and competent. Certainly unexpected given everything that's kind of come before it. But let's not get complacent. Norwich on Saturday is likely to be a much harder examination. You'd think they looked okay by the sound of it on Saturday. And again, another team that went to the end with a late winner. So
we'll find out in a second, because we've got somebody from the Norwich podcast coming on, so we'll be able to get his opinion on that. Alfie, that first half to me was evidence that the players have adapted pretty quickly to the new way of thinking. If I think back to the last time we played Sheffield Wednesday, there were a number of players that were involved in both games, but that was much better on Friday night. A really good example that they've taken on board what the new manager's trying to get across.
Yeah, and I think I've got to apologise first of all, because I don't know if it's the shock of winning a league game or just seeing Southampton play so well, but I've come down with quite a bad cold. I think it is just a case of complete and utter surprise, because it was so good, like you say. It's only been 4 or 5 weeks. But Steve made the point that I wanted to make, actually, and it was, I do think that late winner was really important, not for within the club, because Russell Martin, Jason Wilcox, they weren't going to be concerned if they dropped that game 1-1, because they know it's going to happen at times. They're going to dominate teams and they're going to miss the final touch and not get the points. But for supporters who travelled with over 3,000, really good all game. What you didn't want to see was a continuation of what we saw at Russell Martin Swansea a lot of the time, and that was 80% of the ball, record-breaking passes, but not actually win the match. So it was a really big moment, I felt. But yeah, so many good performances. Will Smallbone, I'm very proud to be a member of the. I've said Will Smallbone should be playing for a long time club, and anyone who doesn't believe me, go back and check what I've said on Twitter and whatnot. I've said that he would be playing, and he should be, and I'm really pleased for him. I think he looks excellent, and it's almost like when Romeo Lavia leaves for 40-50 million this week or next week, you don't really need to replace him. I'm sure they will in terms of a body in some way, but Will Smallbone will have that role now for the rest of the season, and a load of players just showed themselves as a level above as well. Carl Walker-Peters, we haven't mentioned. But he was absolutely phenomenal. Clearly too good for the Championship. Long may that continue. I'm not sure it will. And I want to say about Jack Stevens as well, because Russell Martin said in Turkey that a player is going to look a lot different to how they did last season, the season before in Jack Stevens' case. And I thought he did a few passes. I think he put astray in the first sort of 30-45 minutes, and I think there was actually the first 5 minutes, the carnage that ensued that should have seen Wednesday go ahead was Stevens misplacing a pass, if I'm not wrong. But he was unbelievable in the end. I felt the way he brings the ball forward, so brave on the ball, just really progressive. And yeah, it's nice to see it all come together so quickly. But as Steve and Glenn have mentioned, there's going to be a lot tougher opposition than that. And there will be games where they have 75-8% of the ball and they lose 1-0 or draw 1-0.
Let's talk about Teller and that goal then, Glenn. No doubt in your mind, but Opta, whoever they are, seem to think that actually that was Adam Armstrong.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that drives me nuts in football to do with the administration of football is inconsistency. So if that had been if Adam Armstrong had been a defender, would it have been given as an own goal? No, because it was on target, and end of story really. Teller's hit it. I saw it on I was watching on the telly. I saw it on the first replay that it had flicked off him. But no, I think it's insane to give a goal to a player who's basically trying to get out of the way. He's not looking. He's got his eyes shut. He trying not to get smacked in the face. And I did think it was funny when you watch the following, another replay. He actually wheels away to try and claim the goal, but all the players have run to the guy who's actually had the shot. So, no, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But it would have been with the noise going on around Nathan Teller, that rather pathetic effort from
the campaign,
Burnley.
the social media campaign,
just embarrassing for them, I think. It would have been nice to have had Nathan Teller's name on the score sheet after 6-7 minutes, whatever it was. But no, it is what it is. They've given it to Adam Armstrong. He's 2 goals in 2 games now, isn't he? After Jordan Henderson gave him the ball against Liverpool tail end of last season. So maybe we don't need another striker after all.
18-4 in the Championship for Adam Armstrong.
Marvellous. Dying to dig that one out, haven't you?
Steve, I tell you what, I think I was surprised with for just the one new signing really in the starting 11, which is Ryan Manning. The rest was kind of the loanies coming back. What did you make of Ryan Manning and everyone that had been out on loan last season coming back in? I know we've spoken about Smallbone and Teller, but impressive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Smallbone and Teller were playing at this level last year, so they know the requirements. They know what it takes to win games of football in the Championship. So I think leveraging that experience makes a whole lot of sense. And ultimately, realistically, they're both going to be sticking around. Burnley don't seem to want to pay more than a couple of pies and a whippet for their best player for last season. Apparently 20 million quid in the Premier League. That's not what they're about. So I don't think Teller's going to be moving anywhere. So yeah, build the team around the likes of him. I think for this season, he's going to be getting plenty of opportunities to score. Especially if the fullback lets him cut inside 4 times like he did on Friday night. Stevens was very good. And I've said this before that he's a really good organizer of other people. The problem has always been at the top level whether he can kind of organise his own game as well. And I think at the slightly lower level, I think he's got enough time and the ability and the capability of doing that at this level. So yeah, I mean, if Prowse does eventually go, it does sound as if he'll be captain from that point onwards. So which I think most people would probably say is probably reasonable. No huge complaints. Manning I thought was decent. Certainly first half especially. Got into some really good positions. Unlucky not to score. Half decent save from the keeper. And yeah, him and Adozie linked up really well. I thought for the first half especially. Second half he wasn't quite as adventurous. I think that was part of the issue that I had for sort of a 25-30 minute period, was that the fullbacks weren't quite getting into the right positions to help the wingers out and create that space for players to make runs. Which is why you ended up seeing the likes of Adam Armstrong making loads of runs and just not receiving the ball at all. I think he only had like 3 touches in that second half. Which, while I mean a lot of people will kind of pin that on him, I don't think that's his fault. He was making the runs and you could see it kind of right at the edge of camera. He was making a lot of runs, either coming short or bending in to go in behind, and the ball just never arrived. So that's one thing that I'm sure Russell Martin will be looking.
Yeah, as we said, there's things to work on.
It's
in
not
the week, isn't there?
We're not the finished article. We're not going to be for weeks at least.
I'm going to ask you all about your player of the week, which is something new we're going to do this season. If you're watching live and you want to get involved, who impressed you the most this week? Who would be your player of the week? Glenn, just a quick word on the refereeing. Obviously, all that extra injury time. God knows how many bookings. Personally, nice not to have VAR. When the goal goes in, you're like, it is a goal, and we can celebrate, and that's not to be underestimated. But it'd be interesting to see if that level of pedantic refereeing is kept up going forward.
Well, I mean, with the new rules, you kick the ball away, you're going to get booked. That has always been in the rules, as far as I'm aware, but they're just applying it now. Adam Armstrong's got a book for that, and that was fair enough because he deliberately just walked away with the ball and then booted it. Fair enough. The Sheffield Wednesday guy got booked. I think it was the guy who scored their goal, Gregory. He got booked for kicking it about 2 foot.
Towards the dugout as well, wasn't it? It back.
I mean, rules is rules, and the referee Bobby Madley has applied the rules, but then Josh Windass scythed through Carl Walker-Peters twice and nothing. So it always sort of, this is the inconsistency thing again. So you can tap a ball 2 foot, which hurts absolutely nobody, and get booked, but you can scythe through someone twice and get nothing. And Wednesday had another player on the right wing, Delgado, who got booked for the tackle on a dozy when he stood on his foot. And then he trashed through the back of someone else in the second half. And I'm thinking in the Premier League, both of those two would probably have been sent off. So, like I said at the start, I don't know if that's Bobby Madley things with regards to the tackles, or whether that's just the way it is in the Championship. I suspect a bit of both. So, I'd be interested to see how that goes on. But yeah, I spoke to the Sheffield Wednesday lad we had on last week, and he said to me, "Oh, within a couple of weeks, you'll be wanting VAR back." I'm really not sure. Yeah, I'm really not sure. After that Theo Walcott thing at Brighton last year, and like I said, that finished me off with VAR. I've just had enough of it. So it was nice to see Che stick the ball in the net. You could see the linesman didn't have his flag up. Happy days. Let's move on. But the officiating is going to be somewhat different, and we're going to win some, we're going to lose some, and then we just have to see how it goes.
Well, just before we move on to preview the Norwich game, I'm going to ask you for your player of the week. Alfie, who impressed you the most this week, either in the build-up to the game or on Friday night itself, if you had to single one person out?
I think there's probably a couple, but I mean, I think most people probably say Will Smallbone, just in the sense that he had more touches of the ball than anybody else, more passes. I think he played 145, 146 passes, put 4 of them astray. Just set the tempo, really. So I probably have to say Will Smallbone. But you can make a case for Walker-Peters, you can make a case for Jack Stevens, and a few others as well, probably.
Can I make a case for Stu Armstrong? Because I thought he injected something different into the game when he came on. And I know that he sort of plays a game, misses a game, plays a game. And actually, I thought when he came on, do you know what? We might nick this. That was the moment that I thought we might be all right here. Steve, player of the week for you?
I mean, Smallbone's certainly up there. I think ultimately the key intervention was Nathan Teller in the first half, and he was running their left back ragged. So yeah, that'd be my choice.
Nathan Teller. Glenn?
Honourable mentions to Carl Walker-Peters and Ryan Manning at fullbacks. I thought they were both excellent. Sort of linking in with their relative number 8 and the winger on their side. But the one who did it for me was Sam Edozie. Just beats players for fun. Gets kicked a lot, and he's going to have to get used to that. But he gets up and he gets on with it. And he's quite happy to take on the player the next time, even if he's been crunched. And his turn of pace is ridiculous. He goes from 0 to see you later in an instant. And there's a lot more to come from him. He's mentioned his end product that Russell Martin wants to work on. And there were question marks over his attitude a little bit last year, but so far he seems to have, he seems to be excellent.
Okay.
This season so far. So happy days.
We're going to put together a poll on our social media so you can have a vote for that. I feel like we need a catchy jingle for TSP Player of the Week, like Harry Hill used to have on TV Burp. So maybe we can work on that for next week. But thank you.
Or not.
Get your guitar out, Glenn.
No.
Some with stalagmites and stalactites. That thing.
Now, Norwich City are the first visitors to St Mary's this season, and to help us preview that game, I'm pleased to say we're joined by Connor Southwell from the Pink-Un Norwich City Podcast. Connor, thanks for joining us.
Hey, evening, gents. How are we?
Yeah, we're right. We're looking forward to the weekend. You had a good result at the weekend, right? Happy with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think everyone with a Norwich persuasion was pleasantly surprised. It's there's not been a lot of optimism or expectation around the club, I would say, this summer, which is a really interesting position to be in, given I think the character, or how Norwich are characterised as a club that bounces between the two divisions. That really hasn't been the case. I think most people probably expected them to be somewhere in the 5 to 10 bracket, and that was seen as being quite optimistic. So yeah, I think the performance was probably more pleasing than the result, I would say, because even though I know it looks a 96th minute winner and they've come from behind, I know how that looks, but actually they completely dominated the game, which wasn't the case for a lot of last season when they played when they played. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be positive about, but it feels like this weekend is probably a bigger and maybe even truer test of where they are in their progress.
Tell us about the summer business. Were you not happy with what was done over the summer, or are you thinking, it's pretty much as we expected?
Yeah, it's been a bit solid, if not unspectacular, I think is how I'd describe it. I don't think, Ashley Barnes, Shane Duffy, maybe even Jack Stacey are players who you look at and they really get the pulse racing. I don't think they are those type of players, but Norwich have tried to go down a different route. They kind of, if they faced adversity last season, they really wilted. They were unable to adapt and struggled when they came up to some sort of resistance or challenge. So they've tried to bring in some more experienced players to help manage those situations and to try and get them through things a little bit more. And that was showcased a little bit. There was a moment in about the 89th minute, Aaron Connolly came on and knocked the ball past Shane Duffy. And last year, the Norwich man wouldn't have been willing to take a yellow card. Shane Duffy was just willing to clip his legs on halfway and concede a free kick. So it's a change of approach, a change in direction, and I think everyone is a little bit intrigued as to how that looks. But yeah, it's a good start and a good base that they've got off to yesterday.
And Alfie, no disrespect to Sheffield Wednesday, but do you think this is kind of like the first proper test of where we are? Because this is going to be a different game than the one on Friday night, the opener.
Well, I think it's a different test. I think, to be fair, going to Hillsborough on a Friday night was a relative test. I thought Sheffield Wednesday were somewhat organised. They were pretty. They didn't fancy pressing. They let Southampton have the ball, and that was why those numbers came. But I don't know much about Norwich. Connor's the man to ask. But yeah, he's absolutely right with that perception of they're the team that you'd always think would be in the top 6 or top 10. So I think with the home crowd, that goal by Cherms would have done them a lot of favours. I think Saints will have a lot more time in the first half now. There won't be as many waves to get the ball forward when it is being played around the back in the 30th minute and it's still 0-0. So I think that it's a game that Southampton should win. I think it's a game that Russell Martin will expect his side win, to be honest with you. I think it might be tough, but you probably want to start your home season well.
We've had a few good games over the years as well, Steve, haven't we? There have been some good encounters.
Yeah, my particular favourite was actually the Johnston's Paint game where Grant Holt threw himself on the floor in the 94th minute, only to turn around and see that we'd stuck in a injury time equaliser right where he should have been defending, and we went on to lift the trophy. That was my particular favourite, but I think I would imagine most
13 years ago now or something.
God, yes, yeah, 2010. Going back further than that, we've had some ridiculous games with Norwich. We had the 4-3 the year we went down in 2005, where Henri Camara scored about 3 minutes from the end. But that game was mental. It was 3-3 at half time. Neither side could defend to save their lives. And as it turned out, that was basically the problem in sending both of them down to the Championship. And then the slightly older amongst us will remember 94-95, where Ken Moncow in the last minute pops up at Carrow Road for a 5-4 win, which was equally preposterous. So yeah, there's usually goals in the games between the two sides. Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what Norwich try to do away from home. David Wagner has kind of given the impression before that he's the sort who away from home will be quite pragmatic. And it'll be interesting to see how patient we are, both the team and the fan base, with kind of passing sideways and trying to go back around the other side and trying to make sort of make space in different ways. Before, I mean, as Alfie said, before someone shouting, "Get it forward."
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Ashley Barnes will score because Ashley Barnes always scores against us. But other than that, I think you could. I mean, as has been said, I think realistically, coming down with a Premier League squad, you've got to expect to win your home games. And unfortunately, while Norwich have now got out of the sort of yo-yo effect, so they don't have that sort of we'll just go again and we'll win the league again now. That sort of belief that they must have had every time they went down in sort of recent years. But that seems to have kind of been sapped away, largely thanks to Dean Smith. And I think it's a rebuild job for Wagner, and he's not, by the sound of it, he's not overly popular. I don't know. I mean, Connor will be able to say whether that's fair or not, but he seems to have been one of those managers who was really, really successful in one place, and now everybody keeps giving him jobs, which he doesn't quite stand up to. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they set up. I'm not convinced this will necessarily be one of those high-scoring thrillers, though.
Is it still? Is that a fair assessment, Connor? I mean, what are the expectations for the season? Is there a little bit of maybe we will, maybe we won't, maybe not as confident as you have been before in the league?
Yeah, I'd certainly say that's the case. It's really interesting because I think you've got this weird juxtaposition between maybe people looking at it and feeling that they should be a top six side, and maybe there being a reaction if at some stage they fall away from the top six or whatever. But I think actually there's a lot of grounded people, I would say, who maybe feel that it is going to be a case of maybe trying to get as close to the playoffs as is humanly possible, and that is a realistic objective. So it's really interesting what's happened at Norwich over the last 12 months. I mean, for you guys, it's an interesting one because I think you should look to Norwich and look to Watford for exactly how not to approach the Championship, as was the case last season. And I would say Steve is pretty spot on in a lot of his assessments there. Dean Smith completely eroded a lot of the feeling and a lot of the goodwill that was built under Daniel Farke over a long period of time, and there was a load of issues there which would take far too long for us to delve into. And on David Wagner as well, I'd say the jury's still very much out. They kind of ended the season with 1 win in 11. They finished 13th for a side that's just come down from the Premier League and had aspirations that were set by the club. Dean Smith came out and said it'll be all right. We'll finish top 2. And it was the case that they made when they changed the manager as well to try and push and get promoted. They would argue they were in the running for the top 6 until the penultimate game of the season. I would suggest kindly that anyone who watched Norwich for a prolonged period of the season would tell you that wasn't the case. So I think it's a really interesting place that they're in at the moment. I think the best way to describe it is it feels at the moment like it's teetering a little bit, which is why yesterday was so important, because I think fans are basically waiting to see what way it falls now, because if it goes positive and it looks like they're a top 6 outfit again, then I think a lot of the fans will get behind David Wagner and what he's trying to do, and that will buy him some time. If the performances aren't there and we see a lot of what we saw last season, I would probably suggest that he won't last very long. So it's a really interesting position that they're in at the moment, and the expectation and the range of expectations are really interesting.
Is it one you're looking forward to on Saturday, Glen? I mean, we've had some great games against them.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. For the simple reason it's a massive game for us, because our home form has been woeful since about 2016. It took 2017. It's been awful. You know, they're really, I mean, what was it, 2 home wins last season? So, you know, we said last week, before we played Sheffield Wednesday, that there's got to be a big about turn, just regardless of the fact that we've gone down a division. That there has to be a big about turn in the way we are going about things in order to, turn us from a losing team into a team that wins occasionally. Now, the first step was Friday night against Sheffield. The next step is to do it at home. So it'll be interesting to see how Norwich approach the game and how that, we know what we're going to do. We're going to try and pass Norwich to death, and it's just a case of whether we can do that. To be honest, from what I've seen, and it's not much, I quite like the way Norwich have gone for sort of experience in the centre back positions, and you've got Ashley Barnes up front as a focal point. That both Shane Duffy, Ben Gibson, and of course Barnes, they'll be a threat to us because set pieces, physicality, which is there's still question marks to be answered, questions to be answered about how we deal with that. So it'll be an interesting game. And your goalkeeper, of course, is one of our
fans, one of our favourites.
One of our favourites. So so it'll be an interesting game. I mean, regardless of who the opposition are, I'm looking to how we approach home games. And Alfie said earlier on that the last 5-minute goal, whatever it was, against Sheffield, sort of justified to a lot of fans the way that Russell Martin wants to play his football and stuff like that, and give everybody a boost. Doing it at home, if we can get a win on Saturday, that'll be massive to get a vast majority of our fan base on side. So so I'm looking forward to it from that point of view. Norwich will be more of a test, I think, than Sheffield Wednesday were, but it's a game that after Friday I'm quite confident about how we're going to approach it, and hopefully we'll come out on top.
All right, I'm going to ask you all for score predictions in just a moment. Connor, since you're on, Max Aarons, is it the right back not in the squad yesterday? Obviously been linked with a move away. Can you tell us any more about him as a player? Was he injured yesterday?
He's not been in the squad for the entirety of pre-season. So I saw quite a few people getting a little bit excited about this. But that's and David Wagner said after the final pre-season friendly last week that he wouldn't be in the squad. He's been away with England under 21, so he only returned about 2 weeks ago. So he's not really fit. That being said, he is available, and I think Norwich would quite like somebody to buy him. So if the money is right, then I think they would take it. I mean, as a player, I watched Southampton on Friday night. I think they've been the most impressive of the three relegated sides based on the evidence of the opening weekend, which probably means nothing in reality. But the way Russell Martin likes to play, the way that the fullbacks like to get forward, he would slot into that team pretty seamlessly. I would suggest his track record in the Championship shows he's one of the best attacking right backs at this level. Norwich have made a point, and Sporting Director Stuart Webber has come out and said that he's outgrown Norwich, and he said this at the start of the summer, and that they couldn't help him. He's also in the final 12 months of his deal, so that probably makes it a little bit more urgent. So I would expect movement on him. Whether that's to Southampton or not, I guess we'll see, but it would make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, I would suggest.
Okay, I appreciate you clearing that up. Let's go around the screen with the score predictions then for Saturday. Steve, I'm going to come to you first, please.
I think we'll back up Friday with an identical score, 2-1 win.
Okay, Glen.
A little bit more optimistic. I'll go 3-1.
Okay, Alfie.
Yeah, I don't think a clean sheet is quite there yet, so I'm going to go 2-1 as well, if that's all right.
I'm going to stick a 2-2 draw because I kind of agree about the clean sheet. I don't think it's quite there yet, but 2-2 for me. And Connor, score prediction from you. We won't hold you to this. We won't tag you in everything.
I kind of feel like I've got to be positive because I'm representing Norwich. So I'll go. This maybe isn't. I'm going to contradict myself. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw and sit nicely on the fence. That seems like a nice place to be. So Norwich to score on the counter.
All right, that's been really insightful. So thanks for coming on. And if it's all right with you, we'll catch up again later in the season.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, gents. Good to see you all.
Cheers, Connor. Take care.
Cheers.
Connor joining us here to preview the Norwich game. A couple of other bits before we finish. We need to preview the Gillingham game as well. I mean, EFL Cup first round South, I think is how they've labelled it. I mean, tell me you've been relegated without telling me you've been relegated. Last year it was all about beating Man City and reaching the semi-final. And this year it's away to League Two Gillingham on a Tuesday night. Glen, what are you expecting from this one? Just a chance for some players to come in and get some minutes?
Absolutely. I mean, the priority this season is to get promoted. We're not going to win it. We're not going to win the Carabao Cup. I'm not saying sack it off, but I am saying don't play any of the players who you want to play in the league on Saturday if you can avoid it. I mean, you know, Russell Martin's made mention of the very obvious thing that we have a lot of players. We have too many players, so I wouldn't anticipate anyone who started the game on Friday to play. So just off the top of my head, you got, you know, James Bree, Lianco,
Lavia.
Yeah, Lavia, that was an interesting one. Charles Gineppo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Amo or Kamari Doyle, Sekumari. Got loads of players. I don't know if Sekumari's fit, but you know, there's lots of players who could do with 90 minutes. And
surely Bazunu still plays though, because you can't try and play. We can't try and play this style with Alex McCarthy in goal. Surely, it's just madness. I know it's only Gillingham, but
for a giggle. Oh, maybe
I'd be very surprised if Bazunu starts. I'll be honest. I think McCarthy. Yeah.
Or maybe play Jack Bycroft or whatever.
One of your arguments last week, Steve, about I think when we talked about the Bournemouth game, you were saying about the players need to get used to this Saturday, Tuesday. So maybe there might be a few more players that come in, because this is going to be the pattern for the next 9 months.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I think Russell will take a more pragmatic approach that it is League Two opposition, albeit League Two opposition who have thrown a little bit of money around in the last 6 to 8 months or so. So they're going to be no mugs, and they will be very physical. That make absolutely no mistake about that. So that's probably a game for Lianco getting wound up by somebody, and I'm entirely here for it. That'll be great entertainment. And it's probably it's probably one to. I mean, I'd be amazed if there's not at least 7 changes. Maybe. I mean, you might even change you could make a case for changing the whole 11. I'm not sure I'd quite go that far, but you could certainly make the case for it.
Alfie, is it a case of anything but extra time for you, really?
Yeah, that is the case, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's already
there is no extra time.
Is it straight to penalties?
Straight to penalties, I think.
Oh, well, that's something, I guess. So, what are your thoughts on Tuesday?
Yeah, I think it depends on the fitness levels of a few of the guys. I think Glen sort of alluded to, because Sekumara you'd probably have over, because I think at this point, Che Adams is probably going to start on the weekend. Adam Armstrong probably on the bench, but you don't want to make Adam Armstrong play again. So if Sekumara was fit, you'd like him to play, but he might not be. So same with Don Ballard, who's obviously back playing now, but hasn't really had a chance to play with the first team at all during pre-season. You would have earmarked this as a game where he could have potentially got 50 minutes, maybe 60, 70, or just off the bench. Jaden Magoma will probably come in. I'd like to think, because Juan Larios and Romain Perreault, you'd love to give some minutes to, but we don't actually know how fit they are. So if Romain Perreault's fit, then he'll play. But yeah, I think it's just about who actually is there. Because again, Omar Bella-Kotchap hasn't played. He still exists. He still is a Southampton player, apparently. Campbell Dean's still a Southampton player. We haven't seen him at all. So if these guys were all fit, you'd have all of them starting. You'd see loads of players. They'd have a chance to get their seasons going. But I don't know how many of them are actually available. I mean, I'd like them to get through the Cup, to be honest. I know it's only the Carabao Cup. I think you want to win matches. I think the one thing that Ruben Sellers did last season was, when he lost to Grimsby in the Cup, in the FA Cup, and it was a chance to build momentum. I know that people said it's only Grimsby, but look what happened after that.
He lost to everyone.
That's true. That's true. But look,
he lost again. He lost again on Saturday.
Yeah,
useless.
And you want to win football matches. You want to win games. So yeah, I think for me it depends. I'll be very interested to see the team, just because it will tell us who's actually fit and who isn't anywhere near being ready.
And you've still got players learning a new system, so it's another chance in a competitive environment to get the players just averse with that system and getting them used to it. So, yeah, as you say, all eyes on the lineup, really. Couple of other bits I wanted to chat about. Jack Stevens signing that new deal, Steve, 2-year extension. Everything that Russell Martin was saying, I know we kind of touched on it earlier, but you think maybe future captain, and nice to see somebody, the first person coming out and actually saying, yeah, I'm here for the fight.
Yeah, someone who actually wants to be here, which is always a plus point when you've just been relegated. Yeah, I mean, I think. I mean, I was quite surprised that Bournemouth didn't kind of firm up any interest in him, because he seemed to be very popular there. But then you kind of also look at it and think, well, Bournemouth still shipped 60 goals again last season, so maybe the Premier League level isn't quite for him at the moment. But if he does well this season and we go back up with a bit of momentum, then maybe he's a first team regular again, and kind of things change a little bit for him. But yeah, he's clearly got good leadership qualities. He's popular in the dressing rooms, popular among the fan base for the most part. So yeah, it's a good sort of feel good story for the club, I suppose. A lad who's been in the club for a long time now, committing his future, albeit only for an extra year to the one he was already committed to. But yeah, it's good to get one over the line, because I mean, a player who's likely to be playing every game this season, you don't want them in a situation halfway through the season where their contract's running down, and you don't quite know what their commitment's like, sort of long term. So at least nailing him down for the next 2 years gives us a bit of security there, and we can now move on to potentially similar deals for other players in the same situation.
Yeah, I think Nathan Teller and Will Smallbone should be two of those players that they should be looking to, if they're not already, to give a new deal to be fair. Like you said, the academy coming through, that feel-good factor of having your own player who actually wants to be here, if they can get those two signed up as well, I think that'll go down really well.
Glenn, the Salisu thing we touched on last week, I think that was confirmed this week. But Saleta Sarr, the other one, who joined Lyon on a season-long loan, although his Instagram post would make you think that he's not coming back. It was very Bednarek-esque.
It's an obligation to buy, I think, isn't it, at the end of next season? So it was a financial fair play loan deal that they'll basically buy him next summer.
Let's hope so. But that was another one you're not too fussed to see out the door.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, see you later. Thanks, mate. Thanks for your contribution.
Thanks for trying.
Yeah, couldn't get in a team that was getting smashed every week last
I'd still love to know why he got left out by Celeste completely. I'd still love to know what happened.
There was obviously something going on there. I mean, the guy's got to look at himself. He's fallen away. Was it in the Euros? Whenever it was, he was touted as being the next big thing, and he tipped for a £50 million move and all that.
Very close to joining Liverpool deadline.
All that sort of that would have been amusing, wouldn't it? Being the next Dejan Lovren or whatever. But it just hasn't really happened for him, has it? And he's ended up getting relegated. He's gone back to France, and I mean, it's a shame in one way, because I think he would have been an asset this year, but I think he would have been up there with Alex McCarthy in terms of passing the ball across the back four and all that sort of stuff. So no, not bothered. I just hope that we haven't made too much of taken too much of a haircut financially on getting him out the door. But yeah, such is life. If that's the case, sometimes as we know, we've still got a couple of mistakes hanging around that we're going to have to sort out one way or another, and sometimes there is no other way but to pay the money and get rid of them.
We've had a few over the years. Alfie, are you expecting a busy week? I know, obviously, Tino to Newcastle was photographed at the game yesterday, so we'd expect that to be confirmed, I guess, early. And a new goalkeeper coming in, perhaps, although not to challenge for the number one shirt before we will get carried away. Yeah,
Russell also did hint that I think they might do something in terms of replacing Tino pretty quickly as well. So we may see that, whether that's Max Irons or somebody else. And yeah, Joe Lumley. I think obviously not somebody I was overly familiar with. Did a bit of research once I was told that was happening, and the reviews from his former supporters are obviously not necessarily gleaming. The highlights package isn't brilliant, but he won't be somebody who's
sounds perfect.
He's not somebody who's going to be challenging. You'd like to think that's a cheap deal to get a third goalkeeper in, or even maybe a second goalkeeper, depending on what happens with Alex McCarthy. But yeah, Gavin Mazzuni won't be too threatened by that one.
Okay. Maybe a busy week ahead then. Before we finish tonight, I just want to spend a couple of minutes. We've seen the opening round of fixtures by and large, so I just want to discuss between the four of us who we think our top three will be in the league. Who have we most been impressed with, and who hasn't impressed us, I guess, who have we been most disappointed with just after the first game. So I'm not going to hold you to it, but having watched the first round, knowing what's going on, Glenn, who is your tip for the top? Do you think it will be us? Are we going to be up there, or do you think we might get pipped at the post?
There's no reason why we shouldn't be up there. I mean, we're going on 90 minutes of everybody here, or 105 minutes with the new timekeeping directive. Yeah, obviously we're going to be decent. Leicester are going to be decent. Leeds are going to be decent. The three relegated clubs, as you'd expect. Of the others, I mean, Plymouth are a team with momentum coming up from League One, so they might have a good season, but I don't think they'll be seriously challenging the top places. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Middlesbrough were good last year, but you don't know if they're going to be this year. They lost at the weekend, so no, it's kind of hard to tell. Watford might do, but they're such a ludicrously run club. Who knows what's going to go on there? I kind of completely lose interest in. I lost interest in Watford when they were in the Premier League because it just seemed pointless trying to analyse a style of play or lineups or whatever. So I assume they're still the same. But and there are a couple of teams, probably 4 or 5 teams. So you watch the highlights, and they're just garbage. And this is why we need to, we don't want to sink down to that level. So while we've got the advantages of having as many good players as we have and the parachute payments and all that, we need to get out of this league before we sink down to the level of some of the sludge that's down that's going to be in the bottom half. I mean, from what I saw, Sheffield Wednesday probably won't be down there even. I think that I saw 3 or 4 teams who looked obviously worse than Sheffield Wednesday. So, whilst I think they'll be bottom half, I don't think they'll be, based on the one game I've seen, I don't think they'll be in the bottom 3.
Steve, who are you tipping for the automatics?
I mean, Leicester's attack, I think, is the best in the league. Even though Vardy was dreadful today, they've got so many options there.
Yeah.
That I think, even though their defence is absolute garbage, and I mean, Yannick Vestergaard is now getting starts for them. I mean, how has this happened? That literally the single scapegoat for everything bad that has happened to Leicester City Football Club in the last 2 years, it's all been on him apparently, and now he's starting in their first game down in the Championship. That's mental. And him and Wout Face alongside each other. I mean, just Keystone Cops. It was mental. If Coventry were even vaguely clinical, they'd have been 5-1 up midway through the second half, and the game would have been done and dusted. But as it is, we're in the Championship, and bad defences get let off the hook time and time again. So I think Leicester will be there, unless suddenly they lose a raft of players.
Yeah, Dewsbury Hall, who got both the goals, he's been linked to quite a few clubs. I don't know why particularly.
Well, he's a weird one. I mean, he was good today, but he was dreadful last season.
Yeah.
It's just.
Do you think Leeds will be out there, Steve? Because I think I quite fancy them.
I'm convinced.
We've got a manager that knows what he's doing.
Well, does he? He again feels like another one like David Wagner and Dean Smith and all these others who have had good spells in clubs where they've got the right conditions for them and everything kind of falls into place, and yet they go elsewhere and they're rubbish. Farke was terrible at Mönchengladbach last season. They were delighted to get rid of him. And I think Leeds' transfer business this summer has been odd in that rather than actually holding out and selling their top players, they've just sent most of them out on loan.
It wasn't their choice. They had clauses in their contracts which meant that if a loan offer came in, they had to accept it.
Oh, really? That's
so. Yeah, that was a Victor Orta masterclass, I believe.
Nicely played. So yeah, I mean, you don't know what that Leeds side will look like come the end of August, similar to us. But I think I'd probably back us a little bit more to replace the outgoing players better than they might. So yeah, not sure on Leeds. Mill will be there or thereabouts. Coventry looked good today, I thought.
Yeah.
Albeit whilst not being able to hit a cow's arse with a banjo. They created more than enough chances to win that game. Other than that,
Sunderland?
No.
Lost today at home to
Ipswich.
Yeah.
Actually.
Ipswich are another one that are coming up, aren't they, with that momentum behind them?
Yeah,
like
Ipswich
Plymouth.
have got a bit of us about them in terms of 2011.
They're going to spend all their budget on Adam Armstrong.
Well, possibly, but they've got a bit of momentum. They've got a manager who's got a system that gets the absolute best out of those players, and a squad of players that just fits it perfectly. I think they've been very smart in the transfer market, and yeah, Kieran McKenna looks like he's got something about him. I think
manager at Plymouth as well.
Yeah, I think Ipswich should be top 6. Plymouth comfortably mid-table. They haven't got the resources that Ipswich have. Wednesday will probably be hovering a little bit, but they'll probably stay up. Rotherham be garbage. QPR are done already, really. Jesus. Getting booed by your own fans 20 minutes into the first game of the season is never a good sign.
It's not great when you have to apologise for getting stuffed in a pre-season friendly, is it?
Yeah.
So, Alfie, just your call for top 2. Who are you? Anyone impressed you over the opening weekend?
Yeah, there's not much more I can add than what Steve and Glen have said, really. But I'll make a quick prediction. Top 2, I would say Leicester win the league, Southampton second.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, actually. And we probably all take that, actually, to be fair. So, all right, thank you for that. On that note, that's pretty much it for this week. Don't forget you can follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. It's at Total Saints Pod. We're also new to Instagram and Threads, where we are at Total Saints Podcast on there. So give us a little follow. As you know, if you're watching this podcast on Sunday evening, we live stream TSP every week on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to be the first to see all of the new videos. And we love hearing from you throughout the week. Let us know who you think your top 2 will be come the end of the season, and your predictions for the weekend too. You can drop us a DM on any of the socials, or you can email us at totalsaintspodcast@yahoo.co.uk if you've got something to share. We're also on Patreon, as I mentioned at the start. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. Those 4 tiers on there I mentioned, ranging from £5 to £20 per month, and each of the tiers comes with different perks, including the weekly shouts for those patrons in our Franny Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thanks as always to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Matt Hall, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, and now Saints in Exile as well in the Francis Benali tier, and also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed in our Mick Shannon tier. Cheers, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Alfie. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your comments, and we'll see you again next week.